Hi, this is Suzanne Schaefer. I'm the instructional designer at the Penn State York campus, and I'm presenting on using self-knowledge and purposeful reflection to encourage positive change in the college years. And I chose this topic because I was really struggling with it last year during a project that I was working on, and I wanted to improve the outcome of the reflections that I was asking my students to complete. And so I learned some things, and I thought it would be good to share them. So just a little bit about the rationale and background. So if we're looking at the definition and purpose of a liberal education, we are looking to help our students to develop both personally and intellectually. And I think we do a lot of work on the intellectual side of things, but we don't often think about how do we foster that personal development that we're also looking for during the college years. And so which model can we use when we're thinking about that personal change side of the equation? And so Perry's model of intellectual development in the college years, Gilligan adds the feminine side, Baxter McGolda thinking about emotional intelligence, and Kohlberg's moral development. We have John Gardner and his multiple intelligences, and King and Kitchener come along with their framework for reflective development and students' ability to think in a reflective way. And Paul and Elder, and also Stephen Brookfield's critical thinking and also critical reflection. And so there are many, many others, but those are some of the models that have informed how I think about this particular topic. And in the end, we're trying to support what students know and what they can do, but also who they become during those college years. So another big influence is what we understand about students' persistence and how they actually persist through their college years to graduation. And we know that students come with certain traits and characteristics. They come to college with those intact, and they play a big role in the outcomes of their college experience. But we also know that what happens in the classroom is equally impactful to students. And so having a good understanding of student characteristics and the role those play, as well as how we can design what happens in our classroom, we can have a big impact on the outcome. And I would say also that as an instructional designer, I often work within the cognitive domain of learning, and I think that's where we're comfortable when we teach in the classroom. But when we're talking about change and change on the personal side of things, we're really talking about the affective domain of learning and encouraging change. And so I think it'd be useful if you pause the presentation for a moment or so and just look over this affective domain of learning. If you're not familiar with it, it could be very useful. And so we're looking at using reflection as the pathway to change. How do we do that in a very effective way? And faculty member as the instigator of change, as the provoker of change, as the one who designs the environment in which change is likely to happen. And so the goals for this presentation is to provide a framework that we've been using that I found has been very flexible and I think could be useful in many different contexts for encouraging change. And so it's a cycle of self-knowledge about whatever the thing is that you're trying to change. So where is somebody in relation to, say, lifelong learning? Are they strong? In what areas are they weak? Could they use some help? And then they go through, after they know something about themselves, they go through a cycle of reflection, action planning for change, and then coaching on the part of the faculty member or an advisor or peers or even self-coaching. And in that process, you build a common language in your classroom or in your advising relationship around this item of change. And the takeaways I hope you'll leave here with are a variety of ways to encourage student self-knowledge and awareness, and also some reflective prompts that can help you just go from the everyday types of reflection that we're used to assigning students into something that is more powerful and maybe gets results that you're more satisfied with. We'll talk briefly about the action planning and coaching conversations, but I think this is something that people are very familiar with, and so I won't spend a lot of time on those two parts of the cycle. And just a little bit about our campus context. I'm from the York campus of Penn State. We're a commuter campus, so that means we have students who come to campus, take their classes, and then leave sometimes very quickly to go to jobs or other responsibilities. So when we're looking at those kinds of changes that we want to have happen for our students intellectually and also personally, we don't always have the luxury of leaving that to student services and those kinds of extracurricular activities in which those things can happen. And so we have to be more targeted and focused within our classroom and our curriculum to try and help make those changes happen. So we have a faculty of about 100 full and part-time and about 1,100 students, and we admit around 300 full-time, first-time students every fall. And those students come to us with some challenges, some of which include needing to develop their reading and academic skills, perhaps some naive expectations about the amount of work they need to do to be successful as it compares to what they needed to do in high school to be successful. Students often struggle with learning independently for the first time without having a lot of teacher contact. They may bring some attributes as learners also that get in their way. So, for example, resilience or maybe even their motivation. And finally, not really having an understanding about what college is. So you may struggle with students not understanding why they need to take so many gen eds. They don't understand the role of the general education curriculum within their broader education. And some of my challenges, which brought me to this presentation, were assuming that students know what we mean when we ask them to reflect and oversimplifying what's a complex process. So we often say, you know, analyze this or synthesize this, but we don't really help students to learn how to do that or understand what we mean by that more complex process. And also in our culture, finding time and space to reflect, time and space for silence, to let insights percolate, can be a challenge. How do you get students to identify their own assumptions and uncover those? And how do you design activities to provoke an environment in which change can happen? And I think also it's important to understand the ethical implications whenever we're kind of designing for change, that we do that in an ethical way. And I think finally also to understand those developmental models that we talked briefly about, so that we aren't asking our students to jump too high, too far, too fast, what's appropriate.